Everyone believed Liza Minnelli, daughter of the legendary Judy Garland, had it all: talent, fame, and a perfect marriage with Peter Allen. Yet behind that dazzling red carpet smile was a devastating shock that changed the entire course of her life. One fateful day, she came home early to discover an explosive secret. Her husband, the man she shared a bed and a future with, was in the arms of another man. It wasn't just betrayal. It was a brutal hit to a heart that had already endured far too much. And the story didn't end there. Private photos revealed for the first time will show a side of Minnelli the public has never seen. Before we dive deeper, tell me in the comments where you're watching from. Grab yourself a warm drink, maybe a cup of tea or just some water, and sit back as we begin this journey together. Liza Minnelli was born on March 12th, 1946, at Cedars of Lebanon Hospital. She came into a family that defined what it meant to be born into show business. And yet, few could match her legacy. Her mother was the immortal Judy Garland of The Wizard of Oz, and her father was Vincent Minnelli, the acclaimed director behind musical classics like Meet Me in St. Louis and An American in Paris. In other words, Minnelli seemed destined to shine from the very moment she arrived. Though appearances can be painfully deceiving, Minnelli's childhood lacked anything close to peace. The doors of her home opened to a glamorous world of performances and thunderous applause. Yet, whenever those doors closed, the little girl faced the chaos that haunted her legendary mother. Judy Garland wasn't only a dazzling star on screen. She was also a fragile soul, easily broken. Minnelli witnessed her mother lock herself in the bathroom, scream in despair, and even threatened to end everything. Once Garland fell silent for so long that young Liza panicked. She tremblingly cut through a window screen with scissors to get inside. What she found was her mother still alive. In that unsettling moment, Minnelli realised that sometimes those threats were really a cry for love. Those emotional wounds etched themselves deeply into Minnelli's young mind. After her parents divorced in 1951, she spent most of her time trailing behind her mother from venue to venue or running around movie sets at MGM. The spotlight was so constant that Minnelli believed fame was simply how life worked. At 3 years old, she appeared alongside her mother in The Good Old Summertime. From that moment, a spark ignited inside her. She wanted to sing, to dance, to stand on stage just like her mother. However, when Minnelli expressed that desire to follow in her mother's footsteps, Judy's reaction came from a place of fear shaped by years of battling the harshness of fame. Don't be upset if they compare you to me. A gentle warning on the surface, but one that weighed heavy on a young woman's heart. When Minnelli turned 18, she begged to perform alongside her mother at the London Palladium. Things did not start smoothly. When Judy introduced her daughter, the audience offered only polite, restrained applause. Refusing to fade into the background, Minnelli poured her entire soul into every note. By the end of the song, the room erupted. Cheers roared through the theatre as if a brand new star had just been born. That moment should have been a triumph of mother-daughter pride. Instead, people would later recall that Judy pulled her daughter backstage and gave her a cold, subtle shove, accompanied by a chilling smile. After that night, the teenage Minnelli crossed paths with her mother's friend and protégé, a handsome Australian musician named Peter Allen. The two clicked instantly. Yet Garland had a far more daring plan. She was determined to pair Minnelli with Peter, and ironically, her plan worked. Minnelli fell deeply in love with Allen. And in March 1967, just before her 21st birthday, they married. The couple lived a glamorous bohemian life filled with caviar, movie stars, and clouds of cigarette smoke. For a moment, it seemed as if Minnelli might set aside her rising career to become the devoted wife. Life, however, had very different intentions. By the late 1960 seconds, Minnelli had already made a name for herself on Broadway and was preparing to conquer Hollywood. With her bold, short hair and eyes that always sparkled with pride, she quietly placed her future on an unusual role. Pookie Adams in The Sterile Cuckoo. The character was a talkative, unstable, odd young woman. For Minnelli, Pookie was her chance to prove she was more than just Judy Garland's daughter. She wanted to show she deserved her own spotlight. Excited, she sent the script to her mother, hoping for encouragement. What she received instead was an angry, choked scream on the other end of the phone. Judy Garland couldn't bear the thought of her daughter portraying a character that reminded her too much of her own darkest days. Minnelli tried to calm her mother. Although her hands were shaking, that conversation etched a tiny crack into an already fragile mother-daughter bond. Even so, her determination never wavered. When her first Oscar nomination came with that very role, she knew she had chosen the right path. Yet, the greatest tragedy connected to her mother was drawing near. In 1969, Judy Garland died at the age of 47 after years of battling pills, pressure, and emotional exhaustion. The news spread across the world, breaking the hearts of millions. For Minnelli, it felt like the world caved in. She didn't just lose her mother, she lost the one thing that held together the most wounded parts of her soul. Throughout the years before that, Minnelli had watched Judy crumble piece by piece. The cancelled shows, the sudden fits of rage, the despair that never loosened its grip. She saw the tragedy coming, yet she couldn't stop it. So when the grief finally struck, Minnelli ran. Instead of giving herself space to mourn, she threw herself into work as if the stage lights were the only thing keeping her alive. She accepted the role of Sally B.S. in Cabaret and stepped into a new chapter with a notoriously demanding director, Bob F.S.Y. The production filmed in Berlin, where Minnelli spent nearly every waking hour training, studying stars of the silent film era to craft a Sally who was seductive, chaotic, and deeply wounded. She was performing not just for herself, but in a way for her mother too. Maybe she was trying to fill a void in her heart that nothing could ever truly replace. At the very moment Minnelli was drowning in grief, her marriage to singer Peter Allen quietly slipped into silence. Outsiders still saw a glamorous and well-matched couple. But behind the locked doors of their home were secrets she could never quite reach. Peter cared for her, though not in the way a husband should care for a wife. He hid the truth that he was attracted to men. The cruel twist was that nearly all of Hollywood seemed to know, except Minnelli. The day she walked in on Peter in bed with another man carved a brutal wound into her heart. Worse still, that man was someone tied to her own family. Mark Herron, her stepfather. The betrayal was both absurd and devastating, and it brought her world crashing down. Minnelli forced a bitter laugh to mask the pain. For the rest of my life, I will never come home unannounced again. In 1974, they divorced, closing the chaotic first chapter of a marriage that had never truly been peaceful. Putting her personal turmoil aside, Minnelli's dedication to her craft ignited a global sensation. She didn't just earn another Oscar nomination, she won. She beat towering names like Diana Ross and Maggie Smith. Her smile as she held that golden statue seemed to signal the dawn of an unstoppable era. Yet beneath that glittering celebration, the wounds of her soul remained painfully open. Minnelli began treading the same dangerous path Judy Garland once walked, escaping through alcohol, pills, and long nights of partying. No one wanted to admit it, not even Minnelli herself. But her mother's shadow was growing clearer each time she looked in the mirror. Before she had time to truly heal, she rushed into a second marriage, this time with director Jack Haley Jr. Maybe she needed someone to hold on to. Maybe she needed to prove to herself that she was still capable of being loved. Still, the cracks appeared quickly. The marriage lasted just over 5 years before falling apart. In 1973, Minnelli crossed paths again with a ghost from the past, Desi Arnaz Jr., the son of comedy legends Lucille Ball and Desi Arnaz. The two had met many times at Hollywood parties as children, but it wasn't until Desi ended his complicated relationship with actress Patty Duke that sparks truly began to fly. Minnelli was fun-loving, a party girl, and 7 years older than Desi. This made Desi's mother, Lucille Ball, fiercely opposed to the relationship, especially to Liza Minnelli herself. She believed Minnelli was a bad influence on her son. Even though Arness accompanied Minnelli when she accepted her Oscar for Cabaret, the couple broke up soon after. They had been together for less than a year. Minnelli's childhood had been filled with loneliness and uncertainty. So, as an adult, she constantly searched for stability she never had. To fill that void, she entered a series of rebound relationships with famous men, including director Martin Scorsese and the controversial comedian Peter Sellers. Beyond her high-profile romances, she gained a reputation for showing up in the most unexpected places, always chasing friends, a party, or a new idea. There was a time when film offers flooded in, along with TV specials and music albums. Then, one day, everything seemed to freeze. Starting in 1975, she appeared in one box office failure after another. By 1977, after starring in New York, a film slammed by critics and ignored by audiences, she was officially labelled box office poison. For Minnelli, that label led to even more self-destructive choices. She had only two coping mechanisms for her inner demons: work like a maniac or lean on substances. That combination quickly became a dangerous formula. Moving into the 1,980 seconds, she continued working non-stop, but when the cameras stopped rolling, she drank harder every night. The dependency deepened, and before long, she was heavily addicted to prescription drugs. Eventually, she hit rock bottom. By the mid-1,980 seconds, Minnelli's substance abuse had spiraled completely out of control, leaving her on the brink of collapse. Every time she stepped off stage, the emptiness tore through what she once believed was an unbreakable spirit. Desperate, she turned to her father, Vincent Minnelli, for comfort. With his help, she entered treatment at the Betty Ford Centre. It wasn't a doorway to the light. It was a narrow, dark path that forced her to face the very despair she had spent years avoiding. Her days in rehab were a battle to stay conscious and sane, while also carrying another weight on her shoulders, her marriage. At the time, Minnelli was in her third marriage to Mark Gero, a man who had stood by her side for 13 years, longer than any relationship before him. They once dreamed of a warm, small family of their own. Yet just 1 week after their 1979 wedding came the first heartbreak. A miscarriage. Then, 3 more times, hope turned to dust as each pregnancy ended in tears. During one of those attempts, complications were so severe that she nearly died, leaving her body weakened and forcing her to live with a painful hernia that made walking and singing a daily struggle. In the end, Minnelli had to face a truth that shattered her. She would never become a mother. Coping with personal loss was already agonising, but her career was no kinder. When director Ken Russell insisted on casting Minnelli as Eva Peron in the highly anticipated film Evita, it seemed like the role that would finally turn her fortunes around. She was so close to reclaiming her star power. Then tragedy cut in once more. A conflict between Russell and producer Robert Stigwood pushed the director off the project, and the role disappeared from Minnelli's grasp as if it had never belonged to her. A decade later, the world celebrated Madonna as Evita. Minnelli could only smile through the ache as every star of her prime faded into the distance. It wasn't until the year 2000 that Minnelli could finally say she was clean and sober. Just as she began to enjoy a rare stretch of peace, illness attacked. She developed encephalitis, and doctors warned she might never perform again. For a woman who built her life on moving toward the spotlight and singing as though it were breath, those words felt like a sentence stripping her of her soul. Minnelli refused to surrender. She practiced speaking one word at a time, walking one step at a time. Every tiny victory, a monumental war won. Then came the day she returned to the stage. No spectacle, no grand fanfare, just a woman standing before a crowd stronger than every pain that once swallowed her whole. What left the audience breathless was her choice of song. Minnelli sang Over the Rainbow, the song forever tied to the legendary Judy Garland, her mother. Throughout her career, she refused to perform that iconic piece because she believed it belonged to a sacred part of her mother's legacy that no one should dare touch again. In 2002, Just as Minnelli was soaring high after her remarkable comeback, she walked down the aisle for the fourth time with David Jest, a wealthy and notoriously flashy concert promoter. Many believed she had finally found the happy ending she deserved after a lifetime of storms. The fairy tale never arrived. Barely a year later, Jess transformed from the so-called prince into a plaintiff, coldly filing a $10 million lawsuit against Minnelli. His accusations made the public shudder. He claimed Broadway's queen was a violent wife who verbally and physically abused him, especially when alcohol took control of her body and soul. Minnelli denied everything, insisting Jess was merely chasing money and fame. The truth has remained suspended in ambiguity, drowned by competing headlines and media noise. In 2006, the case was dismissed due to lack of evidence. By 2007, their marriage ended. Another brief tragedy in Minnelli's long saga of chaos. Before she could recover from that public stab in the back, she was dragged into another swirl of allegations. A former chauffeur came forward, accusing her of assault, battery, and even forced intimacy under the threat of firing. The case was settled out of court, leaving behind silence and countless unanswered questions. Once again, Minnelli's personal life was twisted into a sensational script for the world to dissect. What's fascinating is that while scandals swarmed like vultures, Minnelli chose to laugh right back at life. She appeared in the hit sitcom Arrested Development, playing Lucille Ostero, a woman who could devour men alive without blinking. The character was modelled after Minnelli herself. No one expected she would accept the role. Yet, she did, as if to stare society dead in the eye and turn her wounds into razor-sharp humour. Eccentricity and boldness are inseparable from Minnelli. In 1997, during the first season of La Femme Nikita, she became strangely fixated on lead actress Peta Wilson. When she learned Wilson was about to appear on The Rosie O'Donnell Show for her first major interview, Minnelli ordered her driver to bring the young star to her home just so she could offer advice about fame. It's a moment that blurs the line between quirky kindness and the oversized ego of a seasoned artist. Yet Minnelli has always walked a tightrope. She is one of the rare performers in Hollywood to achieve the prestigious EGOT, Grammy, Emmy, Oscar and Tony. A perfect sweep that inspires universal admiration. Still, her life seems determined to balance every triumph with a fall. She is also one of the few women who have won both Best Actress at the Oscars and Worst Actress at the Razzies. The spotlight and the darkness have always walked side by side, refusing to separate. To understand Minnelli, one must confront the deepest wound she carries, the shadow of Judy Garland. Her mother was an eternal Hollywood icon, the voice that sang Over the Rainbow and made the world believe in miracles. Yet, growing up beneath that legend meant every success Minnelli earned was questioned, compared, and sometimes even dismissed by her own mother. The most painful memory came on the opening night of Best Foot Forward, Minnelli's first performance off Broadway. Garland didn't show up. Worse still, during intermission, her mother casually told her she thought the opening was the next night, a flimsy excuse or a deliberate avoidance. Minnelli believed the most heartbreaking possibility. Her mother feared overshadowing her daughter's very first moment of glory. The next day, Garland arrived and the press scolded her for the delay. The true reason was never revealed. In their relationship, love always coexisted with her. Deep down, Minnelli longed for only one thing: to be seen by her mother without comparison hanging in the air. Their story is a generational loop of pain. Minnelli once discovered her first husband, Peter Allen, with another man. Rumours say Garland also once caught Vincent Minnelli with a man, marking the beginning of their marriage's collapse and the end of the peaceful childhood Liza never truly got to have. Yet what makes Minnelli a legend is not what broke her, but how she rose again. She knows life does not hand out miracles. We create them ourselves with humour, pride and relentless vitality. She reinvents herself over and over, rising from ashes like Hollywood's eternal phoenix. People remember Liza Minnelli not just for the seductive eyes or the fiery voice. They remember her because she lived fully, she loved fiercely, She fell hard. Then she sang and laughed as if she had never bled. That is a legacy no award can measure. Liza has shown the world that even when the spotlight fades and the abyss yawns beneath your feet, courage alone can make an entire room rise to its feet in applause. Oh no.